Good afternoon. Welcome from Central Ohio, where it's snowy and cold, but there are other places that it's worse. I'd like to welcome you to this session to talking about Linux software. For those of you who may have been in my other presentation a couple of VTCs ago, we talked about the wide variety of options that you have with the actual operating system and the variations that you have in a desktop. So today I thought we'd talk about the wide variety of software that is available to the Linux computer. I'm setting this up sort of like a grocery store, just kind of a cutesy thing on that. I do want to mention about open source, free and open source software. In case you weren't in the previous one, I kind of equate open source software to recipes. And you've probably been to a potluck where somebody has had a dish that was a very good dish, and you went to ask that person if you could have their recipe because you wanted to do it for a potluck that you're going to. And the one person said, well, you know, that recipe has kind of been in my family, and it's kind of our, secret recipe, but I'd be glad to fix it for you, and then you can take it. And so you take it to the your potluck, and somebody asks you, wow, that was great, what's in it? And you have to say to them, well, I don't know. It's kind of a secret recipe, and I can't tell you. We can kind of guess at it. That's a lot like the software that we go out and buy. You can use it, but you really don't know what's inside of it. When it's free and open source, that would be the person when you asked about their recipe, and they said, well, sure, here's the recipe, and I'm glad to share it with you and take it to your other potluck. So you have the recipe, so if you fix it exactly that way, and somebody asks you, well, what's in that? You have an easy time because you can tell them exactly what's in it. And that's what open source is. You know the exact recipe of the item, and then in the software world, you have the exact makeup of the recipe. Now with the food recipe, if you look at it and you'll say, that was good, but if I added this, I think it's going to be better. Or if I take away something, that's going to make it better. And that's what happens in the software world of free and open source. People can take a recipe for a program, and they said, this is a good program, but I think I can make it better by adding a little bit of extra or changing something around or positioning something. I can make it better by removing something that they had and adding what I have. So what that means, especially in the Linux world, is that we sometimes have lots of variations of the same program with slight appearances or slight features that have been added, removed, just because somebody says this is what I think is better. So when you go to a Linux software store through the distributor that you're getting your operating system, you have a collection of thousands of pieces of software. And if you happen to be using a different distribution, you might be going, and their store might have the same type of things, but a different name and thousands of those. So out in the free and open source, you have unlimited, and there's always programs popping up because somebody else said, I can take this recipe and I can make it better. So you just kind of go through, test out a number of them, and you decide which one you like the best and use it. And that's what I'm going to do. You can see on my slide that in my aisles of my store, I pretty well grouped it according to the tasks that I do on my computer in and out of the daily basis. And so we're going to look at these different sections and see what kind of software that we have and see how a lot of it is very similar to what you might be using in the Windows world or the Mac world. But what I use, or what I think I favor the most. I do want to address one issue that I've had to struggle with people who bring up a negative point about Linux and the software, and that kind of deals with the software Photoshop. Photoshop itself will not run on Linux. You'd have to go through some really big, huge hoops, and I'm not even quite sure at the end if you can. And I've always had people, say, well, that's the big problem. Linux can't run Photoshop, so it's going to be no good. But I've struggled with that, and then I kind of thought about my computer group that I belong to, and I think we have about 160 members. And I looked across that member list, and a lot of them I don't see because they only are members to be part of our repair service. But when I look at over 100 people in that computer group, I only see 3 or 4, let's even say 5 people that would really use Photoshop. So that means that 95% of my membership, that's not an issue. They don't use Photoshop. So I guess the response I would have is that if you were a person that really had to use Photoshop, then you have to use non-Linux Windows, at least for now. And it's the same way in my presentation about Linux. I related them to cars. Most of the people in our computer club are older, empty nesters. They can get along with a very small car that would seat 2 people. They could get along with the smart cars. But we do have a few people in our club that have families that have a number of kids, and therefore they couldn't use that smart car. They have to have a van. So I think it's the same way. If a person has to have Photoshop, okay, then you use the Windows and use Photoshop. But I don't think that the people who use Photoshop in a non-professional way couldn't use one of the alternative programs that I'm going to show you later and meet their needs. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go. So let's go and enter the Superstore and walk up and down some of these aisles and see what we have. Our first aisle is one of the biggest things that we do on the computer is our internet activities. And I've listed pretty much the different kind of activities that I do on Linux or just to do on a computer. And I'm sure that you do pretty much all of these. And for me, I don't think of using Linux. I just use a computer. And the other day, I was working with Huey Poplock, who's over on track 2, and we were doing some testing, and we couldn't do something on my computer. And we kind of worked on it for 10 minutes or so, and then I finally realized, oh, I'm on Linux, and I can't do that with Adobe Connect on Linux because I had forgotten that I was really Linux. I was just using a computer. So a lot of this stuff is very common to all computers. As you can see, we have what we call cross-platform software, that you'll see some of these programs that I use in Linux that you'll say, well, I use those in Mac or I use those in the Windows world. And that's true because we have companies that are intelligent enough to say we're going to write for everybody so that our product is being used. And as you can see in here, I'm going to show you some of these different software and let you compare and say, well, yeah, that's just kind of like what I do. But this is what I mostly use in my internet. A number of them are web-based. And so when you go web-based, you're really not even talking computer. Because when I do my browsers, either the Firefox or Chromium, which is the open source version of Chrome, that's web-based. And it's not really dealing with Linux. And I go back and forth between a Linux and a Windows, and Firefox or Chrome, it's the same thing. The same thing for my email. I use Thunderbird, and it's cross-platform. So it works no different. And the same goes for some software like Teamviewer. That's another whole presentation. I do Skype on my Linux, and I can do Skype on a Windows computer too. And of course, we have a file transfer protocol. We have that in Windows World FTP clients, and we've got one called FileZilla. So let's take a look at a couple of the internet programs that we use. Let me see if I... Okay, I guess we're going to come back to that. I put the slides in a different way. Under aisle 2, we've got productivity. As you can see, the things that we do are categorized by Office Suite, publishing, and then I kind of included a subheading for word processor spreadsheet, because there are a lot of people who don't need the full power of an Office Suite. They just want to do a word processing, or they just want to make a spreadsheet without having the full program. And of course, we also need PDF readers and finance programs. Multimedia. Every day I'm using multimedia programs to listen to things, watch things, burn CDs. And on my slides, I've kind of tried to put a few of the more common Windows programs that people would know, so you can see what I'm kind of talking about. You know, for example, back on Office Suite, most people know about Microsoft Office and Publisher, and most people know about Adobe Reader and as the most common things you find on the Windows, but those aren't the only ones that you have to use. Same thing under players. You know, Windows is using the media player, and you would go out and buy Roxio or Nero for burning. Windows Movie Maker. I forgot to check to see if Bill said that there was a Movie Maker program like the old Movie Maker that was back for the previous, before Windows 7 out there, and there are some programs that work. As you can see, Audacity, if you've heard about Audacity, that's a program that is also cross-platformed. And what's nice about cross-platforming, if you've not heard and done a lot with that, is that for the most part, if you create a file in one operating system with a program that is cross-platform, then you can go to the other operating system and open it and work on it. I used to do a lot of that with my word processing program between a Windows and a Linux computer, and photo programs. You know, same thing. Files are files, and it doesn't really matter what operating system you're using when you're using JPEGs and text files and things like that. If we move down to the graphics aisle, and these are the things we do with pictures and images. Photo Viewer and Photo Gallery come with Windows, and we have different programs that can be used in the Linux world. We have photo managers, where you can take your pictures and categorize them, tag them, and there are some web-based programs like Picasa will do a little bit of that, and we have some client programs that reside on your computer that do it. We also have photo editing programs. This is where we're talking about the Photoshop, and then some of the programs that we have that would do a lot of the same things. And again, it's to the extent of how much work you do. And like I said, most of the people that I associate with are casual users, and we really don't use the full scope of what Photoshop can do, so we can get along without that. And then we also have the painting programs that, like with Paint in Windows, and we do have also a vector drawing, which is not the little squares. That if you've ever used that, when you make it larger, you can see it jaggedy. A vector drawing keeps everything nice and smooth and curved, and we have a cross-platform program that works that too. Then I move on, and we have desktop tools, and the main program that was out on the market was Snagit, and then Windows put into their operating system the snipping tool. And we have a number of different programs, and screenshots are really important. I do a lot of troubleshooting for people with computer problems, And one of the things that we try to teach our members is to have a screen capture program so that when an error message comes up or they see a problem, they can snap it and take that picture and then be able to let us see what they saw, what the error message was, because sometimes error messages go away and then you can't really recreate it. So we encourage everybody to have screen capturing programs. One of the best programs that we use to record everything on your computer, we have a refurbishing program with our computer club and recycling. And there's a program called BellArc that will list everything about your computer. And we also have some of those same ones in the Linux world too. Screen recorders. We're using one right now actually with this Adobe Connect that we are recording it for uploading to YouTube. And we have some programs that will do that. And one of the newest things that people have asked me about, and I had to do some research, is that those that are into genealogy, there's a great program that is in the Linux world called Gramps that will do a lot of what people do. And I'm not a genealogist, but from what I've seen of the program, it is doing what I hear those kind of people do. For disk files and tools, we have a number of programs that do backups. I know that Bill showed us that the Windows has backup, and Linux does the same thing too. And we can do backups of the whole image, backups of the individual folders and files. In imaging, we've got the Acronis program that we have, and ASUS, and we've got one called Clonezilla, and a program that was a lot like Ghost. If anybody remembers using the Ghost program for business, this G for you is Ghost for you. File managers. We were taking a look at the new file manager for the Windows 10, and one of the nice things about Linux is we have a number of different file managers, and you can choose whichever one you like. It doesn't matter what came with your distribution of Linux. If you like one better, then you can. As an example, because somebody was asking a question earlier, with this one called Thunar, it cannot do dual panes, and the rest of them can. The Dolphin and the Nautilus. So that means that if you wanted to do some very easy file moving with Dolphin and Nautilus, you can do a dual pane and just drag stuff across from one pane to the other and move files back and forth. But in Thunar, because they wanted to create a lighter weight file managing program, it doesn't do that. Partitioning of your computer, Windows will do that. You can go in and have it shrink down. But we also have some programs that will do a real good job of shrinking down. The G parted, and then the KDE is just another version of the parted. The G is for GNOME, and the KDE partition managers for the other operating desktop version. Interesting to know that a lot of the partitioning programs that you might use on your computer to divide up your hard drive are actually Linux programs. ASUS, that a lot of people use for partitioning their programs and backing up their programs, it's actually based on Linux, and a lot of people didn't realize that. And we also have some syncing where if you want to keep your files up to date, you can do that as well. Now, aisle 7 is the games, and I'm not a gamer, so I really don't have a lot to say about it other than there are tons of games out there. I have a whole set of the simple games for the deck of cards and the mahjongs and things like that, variations on those, and a lot of the player games are now being developed for Linux through a program called Steam, so that the people who are real gamers can now play all those games, online games, multi-purpose games. They are being created because there is such a higher demand now on the Linux world. So when you go to your software store in your distribution on your computer and you go to the games, you'll find hundreds of games that you can pick up, choose and install on your computer, and keep you happy. And their Steam is adding more and more each day. So I don't really have a lot on the game part because you got to be a gamer. I don't have time to be a gamer. And security is a kind of a tricky question, because most of us in the Linux world, we really don't have a lot of security on our computer with extra programs, because Linux itself is very secure. And so we don't need it. And one of the big reasons, I guess I can explain, is because of this open source, there are a lot of people that have access to the inner workings of your operating system. And there's a lot of geekies out there who have plenty of time just to be looking through the code of operating systems for intrusions. And as soon as something comes, there's a whole bunch of people that are right there, discover it, find it, fix it, and many times I never even know that there was a problem because it was, got cleared up before I even get to it. But if somebody felt that they needed to be a little bit more secure, there is antivirus programs that will work on Linux. There is firewalls that will do more than just the basic ones that your router might do. So they are out there. Now, the one thing that we probably would be using, and I do, is password managers. And we have a couple of different ones that come. We always recommend not using like the browser's password storage. Use your own. And there's a web-based one called LastPass that is cross-platformed, obviously, because it's web-based. And there's a couple of programs. KeyPass works on both Windows and Linux, but in the Linux one, it's KeyPass X because it's just been modified to work that way. So we have all of that. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look, because I didn't move these slides back, take a look at a number of the different software so that you can see the software that we have and kind of realize that we have tons of programs. Obviously, if you're looking at this one, this is Firefox, and being a browser program, it pretty much will work and look and act just like the version that you would use on Windows. Maybe a slight little difference on your phone because of being a phone. But there's Firefox, and there's nothing different about that. And again, if I'm using Firefox, I don't even realize that I'm doing Windows or Linux. Another browser, this is Chromium. Those people who use Chrome, you'll say, well, that really looks a lot like Chrome, and it is. The original open source is Chromium, and then they closed up when they made Chrome. That one is a little bit more of that recipe that's kind of closed off. Linux users can use both Chromium and Chrome to whichever one they want. And just to show you another variation, this is a browser called Midori, which when you look at it, you're going, well, pretty much the same. The difference with Midori is this is a very lightweight one. And a lot of times people like it along with Opera, which is out there for both the Linux and the Windows world. It's a very lightweight, doesn't have a lot of extra features, but it's for the people who just want to get on the browser, look at websites, and not have a lot of extras because they don't need them. If we do mail, there's Thunderbird, and Thunderbird is just a client. It resides on your computer, just like the old Outlook Express. This is the program that people who have been on Windows XP for a long time and we're used to Outlook Express, when they have to leave and they can't get Outlook Express anymore, then we can do the Thunderbird, and they feel very comfortable because it's very, very similar. If I wanted something even more powerful, you can see up in the top that there's two tabs. There's my inbox tab, and there's a calendar. Thunderbird comes with a calendar, and there's an add-on to the calendar that lets me connect it to my Google Calendar. And it is a two-way street. I can add something to the calendar on my Linux machine, and it adds it to the Google Calendar. Or when I go into Google Calendar and add something, it automatically shows up on my desktop. So that's why I kind of use this one, because it's so connectable with the two. Another program very similar to Outlook, so somebody who does not want to use the Outlook or who wants to have something as big as that, a program called Evolution would meet their needs because it has, as you can see, it's got a task manager, memos, calendar, contacts, and email. That's more than what I really need. I'm retired. I don't need to have tasks in front of me. Memos probably. So I have the option of using Evolution if I really wanted a full a more powerful maybe program, but for me, Thunderbird does what I need. Teamviewer and Skype. I don't know how many of you use Teamviewer, but it's a great program. It's a free program that lets you take over somebody's computer for tech support. And it has basically works identically the same as a Windows version would or the Mac version would, and you connect together. The same thing for Skype. There's the Linux look of Skype. It does look a little bit different. Skype is an interesting program because it is owned by Microsoft, but yet they still have a version that will work on Linux. So if you're a Skype person, you can look at this and you'll say, well, that doesn't look quite like my Skype. Okay, it doesn't look quite like it, but it works exactly the same way. I have no problems using that on that one. Our next area, which was productivity, a lot of people use Microsoft Office. This is LibreOffice, which is a free program that has all the same components that a Microsoft Office would have in terms of a word processing, spreadsheet, database, a presentation program, and it has its own drawing program, but it's kind of free, absolutely. There's another version called OpenOffice that started before LibreOffice, but when the recipe got into a fight with who owned the recipe, the people that developed the OpenOffice broke off, went their own way, created LibreOffice, and then the people that stayed, when things settled down, OpenOffice then continued. So we have almost two identical programs that run side by side. But as you look at this, you can see this is more the older look of Microsoft Office before they went to ribbons. A lot of people like staying at that version. So even though this is the newest version of LibreOffice, it still retains the look of the traditional field. A lot of people do desktop publishing, and under desktop publishing, there's a cross-platform program called Scribus that for somebody who isn't, isn't in the business, and it might. I don't know enough about it, but this is Scribus, and it does the same kinds of things that Publisher does, and I can create, trifolds. I can create newsletters. I can create paragraphs that start on one page and end up on another page. It's a terrific program, runs all operating systems, So that works out great. I mentioned that some people don't want a real powerful word processor, and this one's called Abby Pro, and I'm not quite sure how I would really label it as being not a good one, because as you see, it's more than a text file. When you look at it, if I didn't have Abby Word written there, you might think it's just a little different version of an Office or Microsoft Word or a Word product, because it has all the same pretty much tools that you would see in those programs. It just isn't as feature rich maybe as the others, doesn't take as much room, so it's designed for computers that want an older computer that can't handle a bigger operating system. In the Linux world, we have operating systems that are for high octane computers and the ones for the old ones. So the older ones usually go with a Abby word processor and not the full Office. But you can see that would have just about everything the average person who uses word processor would need. And the same thing goes for the spreadsheet. This one is called GNUMeric, or numeric, G numeric. Linux likes to use kind of those fancy words, and then they put the letter in front of the one it's designed for. This was designed for the GNOME desktop, so they're all G things. The KDE desktop programs are all with the K. So even back with the LibreOffice and OpenOffice, there's a version called KOffice. Pretty much the same thing, only somebody has the recipe and they said, okay, we're going to change it around and look a little bit here. Icons a little bit different. So this is a spreadsheet, and those people who do spreadsheets, you'll look at that and you'll say, well, it seems to have all of the things that we usually need. You've got your summing device up at the top. You've got your entry line. You've got your line for your cells. You've got all your numbers, letters. Basically, it's another one of the a spreadsheet program. It's just maybe not totally as big as OpenOffice and Microsoft Office. Now, I do need to go and refer the fact that nowadays we have access to web-based Office software. Because of the LibreOffice and OpenOffice free, Google decided that they were going to offer everybody Google Docs on web-based, and then Microsoft followed that with all of their programs that are on either OneCloud or your Outlook Mail. And so a lot of people just do all of their productivity work on the air because you've got access to those programs, access to your storage, and so they don't even have programs on their computers anymore. A lot of people will do both. They will use the computer in the sky and the programs in the sky and the programs on their desk. And most of the files will work both ways because you're talking about document files, presentation files, and it doesn't matter which program you're using, they read each other. This one is a PDF reader. Most people just know about the Adobe Reader. There's a big campaign with the, that most computers, especially with Windows, supports or actively advertises for Adobe Reader, but there are other ones without. There's a couple different ones I can use on a Windows platform. And in the Linux world, I use one that's called Ocular. And when you look at that, you'll say, okay, again, Linux programs have the same kinds of software, and they look and work just the same. Although the biggest difference is these are all free. There's nothing that I pay for in terms of Linux programs. But I can read the PDF file. I can see the thumbnails on the side. I can do a few things, and some of the programs will let you do more than just view them. This one, you can see right up in the middle, there's a drop-down box for selection. I can change that, and I can highlight and copy sections off of this and paste it in another program. Even cash, financing. There's a program called GNU Cash, or K My Money, that will do the same things that like Quicken would do. And so if you keep your finances on here, you would be able to do it just like you did. And some of these programs even read Quicken files. So if you wanted to switch over, you could take your Quicken file and you could import it into this program and continue with what you're doing. Multimedia, this one's going to be kind of easy because most of these are cross-platform. You'll see in the top left corner VCL. That's one of the most used programs in Linux, but it's also out in the the window world too. There are some programs that are specifically Linux type sound programs or players. One's called Rhythm Box and one's called Banshee. Most people prefer the VLC because it is so versatile. My burning program to do both CDs, DVDs, and make live CDs from ISOs is a program called K3B. And this is a K desktop program as opposed to the one that comes with the other systems, which is like Versario. But as you can see, this has exactly the same things that you would have in those programs like Nero or the other one I had listed up there for burning. You just find the files you want, and a lot of times you can just drop and drag. Next, moving. Audio and video editing programs. A lot of people don't realize that there are some very powerful programs that will work under Linux, and people can be doing some great programs. This is a program. This Bunny is kind of a noted one, but as you can look at the program, I'm not a big video editor, but you can see in here that there's a lot of tools for editing video programs that you've created in movies and then do stuff with them. And the same thing goes with a program like KDN Live. This would look a lot like a program, the old Windows Movie Maker, and you can see that there's a number of tracks. You can put audio tracks, music tracks. You can do slide transitions, and so you can do pretty much the same thing with that you do in the Windows world here. Try to jump ahead so we can do computer graphics. You'll see that in Windows world, this is a GWinView, which just is a editor like Microsoft Viewer. And when I make it bigger, you can see that there are categories. I can store things together so I can find it. This one's called Digicam, and it allows me to tag photos so that I can do a search word search and find all the pictures that were one or the other. Another example of photo editing. This one's the Digicam, and you can see where when I drop down the box for the tools, there are lots of tools. So here's one of the first ones that could be a possible replacement for like a Photoshop for somebody who doesn't need whatever it is that this doesn't have that Photoshop does. And I can't tell you because I don't know what all Photoshop has compared to this, but would be able to say that the 95% of my club members, they would have enough tools for their photo editing in here. Another one is called PETA, and this shows you, this looks a lot like the paint program. You've got all your tools on the side, all your colors. You even have layers, the history of what you've been doing. Another great program that comes with or can get for Linux. This one's My Paint, and you can see a lot of different choices. I don't use this one, but you can see that I don't know why somebody who is using photo editing wouldn't be happy with something like this. This one's called Kita, and again, it's a a lot like the one that's Paint.net. If anybody's used the Paint.net program with Windows, this one is very similar to it, and you can see that it has a lot of upper level type tools on the sides, your color thing on the right hand side, and again, loads of things there. Oh, Inkscape is the one that does the vector drawing, so that when you enlarge it, it stays true to form. When I was teaching middle school computers and we were using Paint, it's a bitmap program, they would draw a small picture. Then when they enlarged it, they wondered why it was all jaggedy around the edges. So I had to explain to them that we were just filling in boxes, and the bigger you made the box, the more that the jagged lines showed. With a vector drawing one, it will not do that. Shutter is a program very similar to the snapshot or the snipping tool. This is what I use to take my snapshots. You can see it, you can do selection, desktop, Windows. What is better about this one is that this one has an editing program. You can see the button on the right, and when you get into the editing program, you can add arrows and boxes and text things on it and then save it. And I use this for all of my teaching guides that I use for our teaching program. I create through here. This is the program that tells me everything about your computer. And if you see here on the sides, anything I want to know about my computer, I have the answer here. A lot like Bellark. There's the screenshot program, so that if I wanted to create my own video of a task I was doing, I could run that. It would record me, record my voice, and I could make the video. It's called Record My Desktop. Great one for doing tutorials. And here's that Gramps program. And you can see how they are able to do a lot like what the other genealogy programs are, and going out through a number of generations. And then since I don't do it, I haven't been a lot into the different options on the side of the screen for what you can do. But for an average person doing it, lots of choices there. Backup program, just like we have in this one, I can pick what I want to back up, when I want to back it, and it runs. So Lucky Backup is one of the programs that we use in Linux to back up our files. This is a file explorer. This one's called Kaja, and it's very similar to what we would have in a Windows file explorer. You have your devices, your computers, your programs, very similar. And like I said earlier, that this one's Kaja, this one's a different one. This one is Dolphin. So on your computer, if you want a different one than what came with it, no problem. You just download it and use it instead. There's the program for partitioning. Syncing program. This one says, okay, where do you want to get your files? Where do you want to put them? And when do you want to do it? So just like with a Windows program, we can keep our files synced in a backup. And this is the antivirus program. If I needed to have one, I could have it. It could run it. And it does the same things that any of our virus programs. It'll let me know if there's a threat, but it usually doesn't find it. And part of the main reason is most of the viruses that are out there are exe viruses. They run on Windows. Exe files does not run in Linux. So if somebody has that. And there's the firewall, typical of picking which things you can allow and not allow. And of course, there's the KeyPass X, which is your password manager. Works just like it does in Windows for KeyPass, and you create that. Okay. Want to try to see, Bill, have you been or David, kind of checking on some of the key questions that people might have that we can kind of...
Yeah, actually, as I said, most of them have been answered. There are two.
Oh,
one of them has been iTunes. Does that work with Linux?
No, but what I've been told is that there are programs that would do the same thing with your music and stuff. Apple's kind of tricky. They've worked it a deal with, you know, Windows, that, you know, you can run Windows on or iTunes on Windows because of people who have tablets that want to be able to connect, and phones. But there is, and I think they're working on a program that is supposed to be more compatible with the, you know, the iTunes, so there might work there. But I kind of think it's the kind of thing that you find a program that manages your music, and you use it. And there are a number of programs that I said on here, like the Banshee and the one called Clementine, that will do that sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay.
The next question was email filters and evolution.
I'm sure they do that, since I don't use the evolution, but I can't imagine that it doesn't. I have filters on Thunderbird, and evolution is the full one that will work. I do know that evolution is the one that will work with the server mail for companies and stuff like that, so it's got to have a filter on it that works that way too.
Yep. And I think the last question we'll take, unless someone else has come up one, is, what do you know, Wine working? And
okay, Wine is a program that emulates Windows. If you install Wine on my Linux, if I would install Wine on my Linux computer, a majority of Windows programs will run because they think they are running in Windows. And so not every program will work. Wine is free. Somebody has to do all the developing to make it work. There is a listing that has like gold medals of the software that you have, and they get it ranking gold, silver, bronze, and maybe the booby prize, so that a gold program will definitely work with Wine, silver, probably bronze, maybe. The requirement is that you have to have a legal copy of that program that runs under Windows to run it under Wine, because most of those programs are not the open source programs that are out there, but they do it. I tried, and I worked with, when I was treasurer of our group, we were using Quicken, and I was able to run Quicken under Wine. The only thing I couldn't do was print out their reports, because Quicken uses a proprietary PDF creator program that did not work because it was a separate one. But a lot of people play a lot of the games under Wine and their programs. But the downer is that you have to have a licensed version. And the problem is, if you've got that program installed on your Windows computer, then you can't put it on your Linux computer because it's a license for one. There's another paid version called Crossover that some of the programs work better than what they would with Wine, because you're doing a paid program.
okay.